Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English Pod. We have an advanced lesson for you today. My name is Marco.
And my name is Catherine, and I'm very excited about this lesson, Marco.
It's very interesting. It's about a very controversial topic and a very popular person in history, Charles Darwin.
That's right. So he's most famous perhaps for his book, The Origin of the Species. And we're going to be talking a lot about science today. So put your thinking caps on.
All right. So without further ado, why don't we listen to this dialogue for the first time?
Man, it's been forever. What have you been up to lately?
I've been busy preparing for my exams, not to mention all the term papers I've had to write.
Same here. I'm up to my neck in work, but at least we've got summer holidays after finals. Where are you headed now?
I'm going to my anthro class. We've been focusing on Darwin all term, since it's the 200th anniversary of his birth or whatever. I'm sick and tired of Darwin.
What? Why? How can you not like Darwin? His work turned thousands of years of ideas about creation on their head. His theory of evolution revolutionized the fields of biology and anthropology.
I don't like him. His theory of human evolution and natural selection is full of holes. It's not as solid as you make it out to be.
Say that again and you'll make enemies with half of the academy, not to mention your professors. Furthermore, the explanation proposed by Darwin about the origin of the species and the process of natural selection constitutes a grand step towards a coherent understanding of the world and its very beginnings.
I'm not minimizing his huge contributions to science. It's just that his theory reminds me of the conundrum of the chicken and the egg.
What are you talking about?
Which came first, the chicken or the egg? This is a classic logical problem, and I think it applies to Darwin's theory. How did the very first living organism come to be?
Interesting. I think that question is better suited for my philosophy class. In the meantime, how about we settle this with a duel?
All right, interesting. They have very different views on Charles Darwin, right?
They do, and they're both pretty nerdy people. This is a very nerdy university conversation that's happening between classes.
Yeah, I think maybe they're like PhD candidates or something.
Perhaps. All right, so before we get to talking about some of the ideas in today's dialogue, let's talk about some of the words and phrases that we hear to understand better what's going on. The first part we're going to talk about in today's language takeaway.
Language takeaway.
All right, on language takeaway today, let's take a look at the first word. And, well, one of the things that many people say is that Darwin revolutionized the fields of biology.
And so he revolutionized these because he pushed them forward. He made many changes. He forced changes. So people had to change the way that they thought about these things.
If you revolutionize something, a topic or an idea, you are creating new knowledge almost, right?
Exactly. You can think of the word revolution, which is a thing. So you think of the Russian Revolution or the American Revolution. These are times of change. So to revolutionize is to bring about change.
Very good. All right, so moving forward, they were talking about human evolution. Human evolution. What is that exactly?
Good question. So you're not a monkey, I'm not a monkey, but we come from monkeys, right?
So we evolved.
Right. So the process is called human evolution. That means the process by which humans changed forms to become what we are today.
Okay, so you evolve. Now, is it evolution? You usually think of something positive, right? Something evolves into something better. Is it always that way?
No, we have another word for the negative, right? So the positive is to evolve, to become better. To get worse is to devolve.
Okay.
To devolve, to go back and to kind of lose things that you had.
Okay, interesting. And then they were also talking about Darwin's theory of natural selection. Natural selection.
Okay, this is maybe one of the things that Darwin was most famous for, and that's why we've included it in this language takeaway, because it's a key phrase. It's something you hear people talk about a lot. Okay, so natural selection is a process, again, and it's the process by which stronger animals survive over time and weaker animals don't. So if there's a weak species, it can't really survive because it keeps dying and dying, and then finally there's no more. And so this is called natural selection because no one's actually choosing what animals will survive, but it's kind of a natural process.
Right, Mother Nature is choosing it.
Right.
Very good. So natural selection, this is one of the things that Darwin is most famous for. And, well, as Catherine mentioned, Darwin wrote the book Origin of the Species.
Right. So origin means beginning. So the origin of mankind, right? So there are many different kinds of animals. You could even say there are many different kinds of like mammals, but there are many different species within that. So human beings, black bears, koalas, chimpanzees. These are all species. And so a species is a classification. So the origin of the species is kind of a way of telling the story of how all these things came about.
All right. The origin of the species. And the last one, this word is kind of strange. He talked about the conundrum of the chicken and the egg.
Okay, conundrum. I love this word. It's very funny sounding.
Yeah, it
conundrum.
Conundrum.
It means like a problem or a riddle or something that's hard to understand.
All right. So in this case, it's the conundrum of the chicken and the egg, right? Which came first? How else can you use conundrum?
You could say that maybe there's a situation that's very strange and hard to understand. This is quite a conundrum.
This is quite a conundrum we have.
Yes. So
It sounds very fancy, very well educated.
it does.
All right. So interesting words on language takeaway. Why don't we move on now to 4 phrases on Fluency Builder?
Fluency Builder.
All right. On Fluency Builder today, we have 4 phrases, as we said. So what's the first one?
The first one is great. It's very visual. You say, I'm up to my neck in work. Or I'm up to my neck in papers to write. Right? So this means I have so much stuff to do that you could pile it up and it would come up to my neck.
So I have as many papers that are almost as tall as I am.
Exactly. And so I could say, I'm up to my neck in work. I have no more time to do anything.
Sometimes people also say I'm up to here, and then they'll
The point.
they'll point at their forehead or somewhere around their head. I'm up to here with your nonsense.
Exactly. So
Right.
this is a way of saying that I'm really busy.
I'm really busy. I'm really tired of it. All right. And our next phrase is one that most mothers use. I'm sick and tired.
Ugh, I'm sick and tired of all of your whining. Go do the dishes and don't complain.
Right. So it always goes together. You are sick and tired.
Right, and sick comes first. So I'm sick and tired of this. I'm sick and tired of your bad attitude.
Okay. So, and that means that you are...
I'm just tired of it. I don't want you to have a bad attitude anymore. Or I'm just,
I'm really
done.
annoyed by it.
I'm annoyed.
Okay, sick and tired. And then we saw a phrase that was a little bit separated. He said, the sentence went like this. His work turned thousands of years of ideas about creation on their head. So to turn something on its head.
Like you said, Marco, it's split into 2 parts. So he turned the field of computer science on its head. So to turn on its head means to completely reverse something, to turn it around. You think 180 degrees.
Okay.
And so if biology used to be one way, then Darwin made it completely different.
So we can say that Isaac Newton completely turned physics on its head with his theory or his findings on gravity.
And then years and years later, we had Albert Einstein who turned those theories, or who turned that theory on its head with his own ideas about physics.
Very good. So to turn something on its head, to completely change the course of or prove something to be maybe wrong. And the last phrase that we have is the person argued that Darwin's theories were full of holes.
Okay, so to say a theory is full of holes is a little bit different than saying that his pants are full of holes, because when you say something is full of holes, maybe they actually have holes. But a theory it's an idea, so it can't have holes. What you're saying is that it's not completely sound. It's not without some problems. And so maybe you're saying that, the cookies are gone out of the kitchen, Marco, and I saw you in the kitchen, so clearly you ate the cookies.
Right, so I can say that's full of holes because it was me and it was 3 other people who were in the kitchen, so you can't blame me.
It could have been the other 2 people.
Right. So if something is full of holes, it's that it has maybe mistakes or it's still missing complete evidence to prove it right.
Or it has bad logic.
Bad logic. All right. Interesting. So we've taken a look at a lot of words and different phrases here. Let's listen to this argument one last time.
Man, it's been forever. What have you been up to lately?
I've been busy preparing for my exams, not to mention all the term papers I've had to write.
Same here. I'm up to my neck in work, but at least we've got summer holidays after finals. Where are you headed now?
I'm going to my anthro class. We've been focusing on Darwin all term, since it's the 200th anniversary of his birth or whatever. I'm sick and tired of Darwin, Darwin, Darwin!
What? Why? How can you not like Darwin? His work turned thousands of years of ideas about creation on their head. His theory of evolution revolutionized the fields of biology and anthropology.
I don't like him. His theory of human evolution and natural selection is full of holes. It's not as solid as you make it out to be.
Say that again and you'll make enemies with half of the academy, not to mention your professors. Furthermore, the explanation proposed by Darwin about the origin of the species and the process of natural selection constitutes a grand step towards a coherent understanding of the world and its very beginnings.
I'm not minimizing his huge contributions to science. It's just that his theory reminds me of the conundrum of the chicken and the egg.
What are you talking about?
Which came first, the chicken or the egg? This is a classic logical problem, and I think it applies to Darwin's theory. How did the very first living organism come to be?
Interesting. I think that question is better suited for my philosophy class. In the meantime, how about we settle this with a duel?
All right, we're back. So interesting, this Darwin's theories and his explanations for the origin of species and life as we know it. But there is the opposite to this, right? There is a certain thing called creationism.
There is, and this is a big source of controversy, especially in the United States, because in some places, people want to teach creationism as well as evolution in schools. And so this is the big question. Are they still equal as theories, or is one theory more proven than the other?
Right. And it is kind of hard to determine which one is better because one is based on faith. The other one is based more on scientific evidence, right? So they're not really even on the same scale. As we learned before, that's kind of like apples and oranges, right?
It is, and there are some people who would say that we have lots of ways of quote-unquote proving what happened in the past, but as long as we weren't there, we never really do know.
Right.
And there's always changes in science, so how can we be sure that what we know now isn't false, isn't misunderstandings?
Right. I think for now, this is the best explanation, but that doesn't mean that it's the correct one. Maybe in 100 years from now, we'll have another explanation that's much better or maybe complementary to this one.
Charles Darwin was a quiet, observant man who loved beetles, barnacles, and long walks through the English countryside. Yet he gave us one of the most powerful ideas in all of science. His theory of evolution by natural selection has grown into biology's central framework, linking fossils to DNA, orchids to octopuses, and the slow rise of coral atolls to the way your own immune cells adapt when you catch a cold. It is such a large idea that it often feels abstract or distant, but the heart of Darwin's theory is remarkably simple. Imagine a population of living things that vary ever so slightly from one individual to the next. Some run faster, some digest food a bit more efficiently, some happen to tolerate a new disease better than their neighbors. Because resources, food, space, mates, are always limited, most offspring will not survive and reproduce, but those small differences can tip the balance. Individuals with features that give even a tiny advantage are more likely to leave offspring who inherit those traits. And through the slow arithmetic of countless generations, the helpful traits become common, while less helpful ones fade away. The result is gradual change, an unplanned and unguided tinkering that molds populations to fit their surroundings. Darwin did not invent the idea that species change. Earlier thinkers had noticed fossil seashells high in the Alps and wondered if landscapes and life itself might be in flux. But most people, including many scientists of Darwin's day, imagine change as a ladder of progress with humans at the top, or as a series of large leaps guided toward a predetermined goal. Darwin's insight was to see evolution as a branching tree, not a ladder, and to see natural selection as the humble yet sufficient mechanism capable of carving that tree's countless limbs, twigs, and leaves. He gathered evidence from pigeons, from the variation of barnacles attached to ship hulls, from the strange distribution of plants and animals on distant islands, and from the layers of rocks that told stories of vanished worlds. In every case, he found patterns that made sense if living species were related by common descent, yet made little sense if each species had been independently created in its present form. Natural selection has two essential ingredients: variation and differential reproduction. Variation comes from many sources. In Darwin's time, the ultimate origin of new variations was a mystery. Today we understand that random mutations in DNA, along with processes like gene shuffling during sexual reproduction, generate an endless supply of small differences. Most changes are neutral or harmful, but some help an organism survive an environmental challenge, find a mate, or leave more descendants. Because those fortunate individuals reproduce a bit more, the helpful genes spread, not by any foresight, but simply by statistical advantage. Differential reproduction thus acts like a sieve, letting the advantageous changes accumulate across generations. Over immense spans of time, small differences add up to large ones. Given enough time, a population may change so much that it becomes a new species, unable to interbreed with the original stock. Multiply such branching events across hundreds of millions of years, and you can explain the diversity of life from microbes thriving in volcanic vents to blue whales cruising Antarctic seas. Some people find it hard to imagine how slow change can yield complex structures like the vertebrate eye or the wings of bats. Darwin tackled this head-on. He pointed out animals with simple light-sensitive spots, others with shallow cups that gave crude directional vision, and still others with lenses of increasing precision. These intermediates show that complexity can arise through many small, useful steps. Modern research has filled in more details, revealing genes that guide eye development in flies, mice, and humans, demonstrating that nature reuses and modifies genetic toolkits rather than starting from scratch. The so-called irreducible complexity evaporates when we uncover enough intermediate stages. Darwin's theory does not say that evolution is always slow, nor does it deny the role of chance. Sometimes populations face sudden environmental shocks or colonize new habitats where natural selection can drive rapid change. Sometimes lineages dwindle for reasons unrelated to adaptation, like catastrophe or bad luck, a process known as genetic drift. Evolution is a tapestry woven from both chance and necessity. Natural selection is a consistent force, but it has no foresight and no ultimate goal. It merely preserves what works well enough here and now. Although Darwin focused on anatomy, behavior, and fossils, his ideas anticipated modern genetics. When scientists discovered the structure of DNA and decoded the genetic code, they found exactly the patterns expected if species share common ancestors. A gene that helps yeast break down sugar may have a recognizable cousin in a sunflower, a fruit fly, and a chimpanzee, each modified yet echoing a shared origin. Chromosomes bear scars of ancient viral insertions, chromosomal fusions, and duplicated genes, all pointing to a branching history of descent. Mutations accumulate at rates that, like radioactive isotopes in geology, can be used as molecular clocks to estimate how long ago two species diverged. These clocks align well with dated fossils, providing independent confirmation. Natural selection is not confined to wild animals trudging across savannas. We wield it whenever we breed crops or livestock, choosing seeds from the most fruitful plants or pairing the healthiest cattle. In laboratories, scientists can evolve bacteria that digest new chemicals or viruses that resist drugs, simply by imposing selection and watching change unfold over months or even weeks. Your own body is a battleground of evolution. Your immune system evolves new antibodies when you get vaccinated. Tumors evolve defenses against chemotherapy. The same principles explain the rise of antibiotic-resistant superbugs, a growing medical crisis in which bacteria evolve so quickly that our drugs lag behind. Evolution also leaves footprints beyond biology. The fossil fuel in your car once fed ancient forests and plankton, whose buried remains turned to coal and oil. The oxygen you breathe came from early photosynthetic microbes whose success changed Earth's atmosphere. The limestone in cathedrals and the chalk cliffs of Dover are made of shells from microscopic plankton that lived in warm Cretaceous seas. Evolutionary history shaped landscapes, dictated which minerals formed, and helped lock carbon underground. Even human culture shows evolutionary patterns, as languages, ideas, and technologies compete, replicate, and diverge. Darwin was cautious about applying his ideas to humans, but in his later book The Descent of Man he argued that our species, too, is part of the same tree of life. Modern anthropology, genetics, and archaeology confirm this, tracing our ancestry through hominins like Australopithecus, Homo habilis, and Homo erectus. We are not descended from the chimpanzees of today. Rather, humans and chimps share a common ancestor that lived roughly 6 or 7 million years ago. The human story includes migrations out of Africa, interbreeding with Neanderthals and Denisovans, and adaptations to high altitude in Tibetans or lactose digestion in dairying cultures. Evolution does not stop with us. Our genes continue to change, influenced by diet, disease, and even cultural practices. Some worry that to accept evolution is to adopt a bleak view of life, one with no purpose or moral compass. Darwin himself, though agnostic in later years, found deep wonder in the tangled bank of living things. Evolution does not tell us how we ought to behave. It tells us how we came to be. It reveals that all organisms are distant cousins, united by shared chemistry, and an unbroken chain of being that stretches back over 3.5 billion years. That kinship can inspire awe, curiosity, and a sense of responsibility for the other branches of the tree of life. Knowing that natural selection is indifferent to our continued existence, we alone must decide how to steward the planet and each other. Darwin's legacy is not frozen in the 19th century. Scientists refine and extend his ideas every decade. The discovery of DNA, the rise of molecular phylogenetics, the study of evolutionary development, known as evo-devo, and the burgeoning field of evolutionary medicine all draw direct lines back to Darwin's insight. Sometimes new findings complicate the picture, adding lateral gene transfer among bacteria or symbiosis as drivers of novelty. Yet these complexities enrich rather than overturn the core principle of descent with modification filtered by natural selection. As with all science, the theory of evolution invites skepticism and careful testing. No single fossil, gene sequence, or observation serves as its lone pillar. Rather, millions of clues from geology, paleontology, biochemistry, ecology, and comparative anatomy interlock into a coherent whole. To reject evolution, one must dismiss this entire tapestry and the predictive power it grants. When we sequence a newly discovered virus, we rely on evolutionary models to track its spread. When we conserve endangered species, we examine genetic diversity to avoid inbreeding. When we study the origins of antibiotic resistance, we monitor evolutionary pathways to design better drugs. Evolution is not a mere story we tell about the past. It is a tool that works in the present. Charles Darwin passed away in 1882 and was buried in Westminster Abbey near Isaac Newton, a quiet honor for a man whose ideas once shocked polite society. He had faced his own doubts, aware that his theory would challenge religious and social norms, yet he published because the weight of evidence compelled him. He offered a grand, unifying explanation for life's diversity, and though it was incomplete and imperfect, it opened a path that countless scientists have walked, filling gaps he could scarcely imagine. Today his portrait hangs in laboratories, classrooms, and natural history museums, not as an icon of infallibility, but as a reminder that careful observation, relentless curiosity, and the courage to follow evidence wherever it leads can forever change how we see the world. To understand Darwin's theory is to appreciate the power of simple processes repeated over vast spans of time. It teaches humility, for we are latecomers in a colossal story, shaped by forces that cared nothing for our aspirations. Yet it also teaches possibility, for if blind selection can craft the iridescent wing of a butterfly, the echolocation of a bat, and the neural circuitry that lets you ponder your own origins, then creativity is woven into nature itself. We inherit that creativity, not as a dictated destiny, but as a toolkit for exploration. Evolution gave us brains capable of tracing our lineage through stardust and fossils, through genes and geological strata, capable even of imagining futures in which we guide our own evolution responsibly. As you walk through a forest, consider the ancient partnership between fungi and tree roots, an alliance older than the dinosaurs that helps plants absorb nutrients. As you sip coffee, remember that caffeine began as a bitter defense against insects, yet became a stimulant cherished by primates who learned to roast beans. As you stare at the small bones in your wrist swiveling over a keyboard, recall that they once belonged to walking fish whose fins bore early versions of fingers. We are mosaics of deep time. Darwin handed us the key to read that mosaic, to connect present wonders to ancient origins. In doing so, he invited everyone, scientist and layperson alike, to join the greatest detective story ever told. The story of life evolving on a tiny planet orbiting an ordinary star, where ordinary creatures learn to question, to think, and to marvel at the paths that led them here.
The English Pod Audio Review. Listen to the meaning, then say the vocabulary word. Bored or annoyed.
Sick and tired.
In a state of disagreement.
At odds with.
Logical and consistent.
Coherent.
To make something as small as possible.
Minimize.
Including many faults.
Full of holes.
A school that provides training in special subjects.
Academy.
A process by which the best creatures survive.
Natural selection.
A confusing or difficult problem.
Conundrum.
Let's try that faster. To make something as small as possible.
Minimize.
Bored or annoyed.
Sick and tired.
Logical and consistent.
Coherent.
A process by which the best creatures survive.
Natural selection.
In a state of disagreement.
At odds with.
A confusing or difficult problem.
Conundrum.
Including many faults.
Full of holes.
A school that provides training in special subjects.
Academy.
Now say the word and hear it in a sentence.
Sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of eating beans for every meal. Sick and tired. After 30 years of marriage, she became sick and tired of waiting on him hand and foot. Sick and tired. We are sick and tired of corruption. We demand change now. At odds with. The professor's opinions were often at odds with his students' views. At odds with. The president was often at odds with Congress. At odds with. Instead of being continually at odds with each other, the competitors agreed to cooperate. Coherent. She could speak at length about films in a coherent and eloquent manner. Coherent. The dazed man could not deliver a coherent response to his rescuers. Coherent. This report is confusing and entirely incoherent. Write it again. Minimize. I don't want to minimize your contributions to this company, but you must admit that idea was not yours. Minimize. Minimize your impact on the environment and try to recycle. Minimize. During the interview, she minimized her weaknesses and emphasized her strengths. Full of holes. Your paper is well written, but your thesis is full of holes. Full of holes. We need to buy a new bucket. This one is full of holes. Full of holes. The jury decided the man was guilty because his case was full of holes.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode and gained some new insights. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes. See you next time.